Welcome to AINdebrief, where we take a look back at the most important aviation stories of the past week by the AIN editors who covered them. I'm AIN Alerts editor Chad Trautvetter. In this week's episode, I explain the reasoning behind why two of the largest private aviation operators, NetJets and Directional Aviation, are expanding while business aircraft flying is still suffering from the effects of COVID-19. The AIN editorial team also provides highlights from the second quarter results at several OEMs and services companies. Air transport editor Gregory Polek delves into Boeing and Airbus results. I go over the numbers from Dassault and Gulfstream parent General Dynamics. Senior editor Kerry Lynch looks at Textron Aviation's quarter, and FBO editor Curt Epstein pours over Signature Aviation's first half. And to end it, Editor-in-Chief Matt Thurber discusses the cyber attack that sidelined some aviation data services last week at Garmin. So, Curt, ask me a question.
Okay. So, Chad, I hear we had some good news on some of the major players in the private lift segment of the last week. Can you give us some details?
Yeah, actually, earlier this week, NetJets announced that they were going to reinstate NetJets Europe. They had furloughed a bunch of crew and shelved some airplanes due to the COVID situation. And this week they said that they're recalling all of the crew. So NetJets Europe will be back up and running full speed again. And they also said that they're going to add 60 new aircraft in the next year and a half. And that really speaks to the influx of new customers that we're seeing into private aviation. The people who normally had flown airlines before but could afford private, now turning to private aviation because it's a easier and safer way to fly during the COVID crisis. Actually, also another company, which is a competitor to NetJets, with FlexJet, the parent company Directional Aviation, announced this week that they are launching a premium charter service using ex-FlexJet Challenger 300s and Global Expresses. And basically, this is also in response to COVID. They were going to launch the new entity called FX Air in the fourth quarter, but they decided to pull it forward specifically because they're seeing more interest from these new entrants. So really, this speaks to a larger thing in the industry, is that two major players are expanding. So the influx of new customers is real, and also they expect it to be more long term. It's the question up until now is this a short term thing and is it going to go away? But apparently they're committing to putting money into this, so they see a longer term picture here.
All right. Was there ever any danger of NetJets Europe not coming back?
No, I doubt it. I think really they stood everything down because of the really tight restrictions in Europe, and now they're lifting, and now they can actually move airplanes around. Before they could only go domestic, so somebody in France could only fly within France, and even then there was quarantines involved. So now you can fly through the Schengen area pretty much unrestricted. So that really helps a lot of things with operations. There was no point before that.
And with Directional, what separates that from their regular FlexJet service? Well,
FlexJet's fractional, but the FX Air is a on-demand charter service. So it's pay-as-you-go, or they also have a debit card plan called Aviator that you can basically use to pay for flights. And the Aviator program also has some other benefits, such as priority booking, fixed cost coast-to-coast flights, and it's meant for U.S. customers. And they said that they're going to develop something similar on the private fly side, which is their UK-based subsidiary, and that will kind of cater towards more of an international customer base.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks, Curt. Thanks for asking me some questions. And let's go over to Greg. In the larger sense is that, this week we're getting a lot of the second quarter results, and the Boeing and Airbus was the companies among them. So what's going on at Boeing and Airbus?
Yeah, that's right, Chad. Both companies took a big loss during the second quarter, which really wasn't unexpected. Boeing lost $2.4 billion, and Airbus 1.226 billion euros, which comes to about $1.4 billion. But I think most of the interesting news came out of the Boeing earnings call. First, I think one of the most interesting things is they decided to delay the 777X introduction by about a year to 2022. Apparently, that had more to do with the airlines than their own internal technical issues. But apparently the airlines just aren't ready for delivery yet. I mean, it was supposed to go to Lufthansa early in 2021, but it's looking like early 2022 when first 777X will get delivered. They also cut production rates, or they announced a cut in production rates on the 787 from what is 10 right now to 6. That's per month, yeah. And then the 777 and 777X combined will go from 5 to 2. And those are, I think, both 2022. They also delayed the ramp up of the MAX. They were planning on going to 31 a month next year at some point, but now that's going into early 2022. And some of that might have to do with the fact that they also are not expecting recertification of the MAX until the fourth quarter now this year, whereas the last estimate was third quarter. Of course, it all depends on the FAA, and that's what they always say, but they have a fair bit of confidence that it'll happen in the fourth quarter right now. But
also on the MAX, they have to worry about international recertification too. That's going to be country by country, right?
I think they're all doing it in concert, really. EASA and the Brazilian authorities and Transport Canada are working with the FAA, and I don't think there's going to be a big lag between FAA certification and EASA. But other programs that are taking a hit. The 747 program is coming to an end in 2022, which was pretty big news. I guess it wasn't that unexpected. There was some scuttlebutt about it earlier this month. But there was, of course, Boeing did not confirm anything until yesterday. And then back to the MAXs, they're not expected to deliver the majority. Well, they do expect to deliver the majority of the MAXs. There are about 450 of them on the ground right now in storage within about a year of the fourth quarter recertification of the MAX. So that was really the first I heard that much specificity as far as that goes. Another interesting thing is the 787 with the reduction in production rates. They're talking about consolidating all activity into one factory now. As you know, there's one in Everett, Washington, and one in North Charleston, South Carolina. The Washington one is a union shop, and South Carolina isn't. And so I guess speculation holds it that they would prefer South Carolina for that reason. But I mean, there are a lot of different issues that need to be resolved, and they say they just started the study into the into the whole process. So there was just quite a bit of it was just a flood of different things that I found interesting. That really none of the analysts didn't really seem to question much about some of these things. It was mainly about their cash position, and I guess that's normal for an analyst. So Airbus was today. It was this morning. Again, they took about a $1.4 billion loss, but their main news was that they expect to deliver, they said, a significant number by the end of the year. What that means, I'm not quite sure, whether that's the majority or not. They weren't really specific. And also, they are, again, cutting production of the A350 from 6 down to 5, which is a pretty modest cut. But originally, it was at 10, and in April, and they announced it would go from 10 to 6. So that's now cut in half, A350. So there's a lot of worry about what's going on with the wide body market in particular, and I think these production cuts on the 787 and the A350 reflect that.
I was going to say the wide bodies are taking a beating.
Yeah, they sure are. And it's going to take much longer for the wide body market to recover, I think, because most people say this. It's just that international flying is going to take longer to come back, and particularly long haul flying. Then it'll take much longer for that to come back than narrow body domestic flying. So it's an interesting time.
All right, so let's go over to the business aviation OEMs. Some of them fared a little bit better than Boeing and Airbus, fortunately. I'll start with Gulfstream. On Tuesday, actually on Wednesday, sorry, Gulfstream parent General Dynamics had their second quarter investor call. And actually, the interesting thing is that Gulfstream has actually delivered one more airplane in the second quarter this year than it did last year. But on a bigger picture view, in the first 6 months, their deliveries are down about 10 airplanes from last year. They delivered 65 aircraft last year and only shipped 55 in the first half of this year. Now, granted, there's a couple Gulfstream G650s that have been finished but can't be delivered because of the international restrictions. So they didn't really say how many there are, but that'll slide into the third or fourth quarter. So they're looking to hit but overall for the year, they're looking to hit their target of between 125 and 130 jets. That was the projection they gave at the end of the first quarter, which was down from 150 aircraft. And Phoebe Novakovic, who's the chairman and CEO at General Dynamics, said that the sales environment, though, is very difficult because they can't travel to see customers and demonstrate aircraft. She said everything has to be done by telephone right now. So their sales were kind of anemic. Their book-to-bill was 0.54 to 1, which means they sold about a half aircraft for every aircraft that went out the door. So, but she's more optimistic about the second half, especially if COVID-19 can come under control and the restrictions further lift. She's very optimistic about sales. She said there's a lot of demand. It's just closing the sales are difficult because of the situation right now. But the good news is that she said they went in the second quarter with a very strong position and expect to emerge from it even stronger. And she also noted the second quarter was the low point for Gulfstream, so that's the bottom for them. So everything else is going to be upward. So Curt, you want to ask me about Dassault?
Sure. So Chad, you also covered Dassault. What did Dassault, who only reported their first half and year-end numbers, what did Dassault have to say?
Well, Dassault was a little less optimistic, but they plan to they cut their production for the year again from 40 this year to 30. They only delivered 16 aircraft in the first half, and that's considerably down from last year and even less than previous years when they were delivering almost 50 or 60 airplanes a year. And also during COVID, they kept their production lines open, and they also kept engineering and other activities around the Falcon 6X going. And they're saying that they're going to continue to stay on schedule with first flight next year of the Falcon 6X, and then followed by entry into service in 2022. That said, the new Falcon, which they're calling the NX, was supposed to be launched this year, but they've postponed that, not necessarily because of COVID specifically, but they want to make the announcement with their production partners. So they are just holding that until hopefully next year, I guess. But they really didn't give a timeline for that.
What are we expecting in terms of the NX? Where in this segment is that going to fall?
The NX is going to be at top of the line. It's going to be their flagship. A lot of people call it the 9X, which would put it above the 8X. It's going to be an ultra long range airplane, large cabin, 4 or 5 zones. It's going to compete with either the Gulfstream G650 slash Global 6000 or the Gulfstream 700 or the Bombardier Global 7500. It's going to be in that range. And actually, Dassault also said some things about sales. They, like Gulfstream, they said it's just very difficult. They took in net orders for 5 Falcons, which was actually 2 less than last year. And their backlog is now at 42 aircraft. It's down about 11 aircraft from last year. And like Gulfstream, they also had some aircraft that could not be delivered due to travel restrictions, that are hoping that they're able to deliver those later in the year. On a brighter note, they didn't experience any order cancellations, but they do have some deferred deliveries from this year to next year, which is probably why they cut the production rate from 40 to 30. All right, so Kerry, let's talk about Textron, which released their results on Thursday. So it wasn't quite as bright at Textron, and actually all the analysts believe that Textron is probably the weakest player of all the business jet OEMs right now.
Well, Chad, by most metrics, Textron Aviation had a rough quarter, and some might even have called it a disastrous quarter, except it's within context of the pandemic, so everybody understands what's going on and why it's happening. So numbers wise, they had a $66 million loss on the quarter, and that's a huge turnaround because they posted a $105 million profit this time last year. A big reason is because Citation deliveries dropped in half. They delivered 23 on the quarter, and that's down from 46 at the second quarter of 2019. Interestingly, that 46 that they delivered in the second quarter of 2019 matched the entire delivery slate that they've done for Citations this entire year. So that shows the disparity, or how much they've plummeted. And turboprops are down for the quarter. They delivered 15 versus 34 last year. And on the year, they delivered 31 versus 78 this time last year. And backlog notably has shrunk by $500 million to $1.4 billion. Now, also hammering away at them is aftermarket. The revenues from that was down by more than 30%. And they think that that's going to improve as people begin flying more and more. And they also think their results, obviously, like everybody else, they're going to get stronger as the year goes on, as more things open up, people fly more. And they said they've now got people back in the field selling planes. So, and they're seeing some activity primarily at the lower end. They see some interest in turboprops, particularly the King Air 250 and the M2. So they think it's, high net worth individuals stepping into these planes, or small owner flown type businesses that are showing interest. But one of the things Scott Donnelly, who is the chairman and CEO of the parent company Textron, one of the things he said that he found encouraging, and we've heard this even from the charter market, is that there's a whole group of new people coming into the market. And while Textron may not immediately sell planes because of these new people, it really positions the industry well in the medium and long terms, because usually you come in through charter or flying clubs and you build up to whole ownership. So he thinks that's a bright spot.
Did they talk about what their outlook is for this year for deliveries?
No, they didn't give specific numbers for deliveries, although they have cut back production. And as a matter of fact, they've laid off 1,100 people, and that's after a series of production stoppages and furloughs. But they said, they're matching it to market demand. Somebody asked them about whitetails buildup, and Donnelly's response was that they try very hard not to have white tails.
Yeah, what worries me is the backlog, and the fact that They're kind of at half rate production right now compared to last year, and they still shaved off $500 million from the backlog. That means that even at a low rate, they only have 3 years of backlog. So if they increase the rate, then that decreases that forward-looking backlog, right?
Well, Chad, Scott Donnelly did not specify exactly what they'd be doing production rate wise, but he did say they're going to be down 30 to 40% on the year and perhaps maybe getting half of that back next year. He was also asked about whitetails, and he said that they're trying to match production to order intake, so there should be very few whitetails.
So they're hoping to catch some of this back next year then?
Yes, well, and that goes with the theme that it's going to get better as each quarter goes on, and as they sell more, and it's going to be the lighter end first, but hopefully they'll get back to their larger products as time goes on.
Okay, thanks, Kerry. So Curt, Signature also had their first half results earlier this week. So the company is very dependent on aircraft movements. So what did they say?
Well, that's right, Chad. Obviously with the reduction in flying, FBOs, as you mentioned, that's their lifeblood, is flying. That's their reason to exist, is to support the flying public. So there's no question that this pandemic has hurt that industry as well. And Signature, which is the largest FBO operator in the world, noted that in the U.S. For April, when the pandemic was really well and truly installed in the U.S., it saw about a 77% decrease in flight activity. But that started to come back in next month. That was down by 58%. And in June, the flight activity year on year is only down 32%. So it's slowly coming back. And the company reported that its revenue decline in its FBO and Technicare maintenance business was down about 29% for the first half of the year. And if you look at the FAA numbers for U.S. business and general aviation movements, that pretty much dovetails. They say it's about a 30% decline in U.S. flight activity. So that decrease pretty much goes hand in hand with the decrease in flying. But the company, it applied for a U.S. CARES Act fund, and it was approved last month, $80 million in funding, of which $19 million is a loan, and the company expects to repay that by the end of the year. But the company is in good shape. It managed to reduce its hours through reductions in furloughs. It reduced its direct labor hour costs by about 50% compared to pre-COVID levels. And with the CARES Act, it noted that it's recalled all of its furloughed employees.
They also announced some expansion plans too, right?
Yes, even amidst this, they're still growing. They just announced that they purchased the former TAG Aviation FBOs in Switzerland, which is Geneva, which is the company admitted someplace it's been aching to get to for years. It now has the largest service provider there on the airport, and also in Sion. And that transaction will be concluded, they expect, in the third quarter. So that will add a real plum there to the Signature network. So the company's still going, but it's juggled its funding. It's it's working its deals with its lenders. Out of a $400 million revolving credit facility, it still has $321 million of undrawn money. So the company is it's in not great shape, but it's in good shape as far as weathering the storm.
Did they talk about the second half, or what do they expect?
Well, the trend seems to be on the rise. So, as the things go, they'll increase more services. They rolled out a Signature Assure program, which is a whole approach to training, technology, and operation, dealing with the COVID virus and how to keep their facilities clean and operational. So they're taking the steps that they need to ensure that their business will survive this and come out of it strong.
Thanks, Curt. So, Matt, late last week into early this week, Garmin had some issues with their servers due to a cyber attack. So what exactly happened over at Garmin? How did they fix all this?
That's a good question, Chad, because Garmin said they had a system outage. That's the official word. But news reports suggested that it was a ransomware attack and that the attackers were asking for $10 million. So the good news is that all Garmin's aviation functions, database updates, flight plan filing, all that stuff is back to normal. All the aviation aspects are back to normal as of now.
Last Thursday into early Friday morning, everything was pretty much down, right?
It wasn't everything. For example, you could still fly with your Garmin avionics as long as you had updated information, current information, but database updates were affected, yes. If you had a Garmin InReach Iridium device, for example, you could still use it perfectly well, but you might have trouble updating GPS databases, that kind of thing.
Did they talk about anything that they put into place to stop this kind of thing from happening again?
No, I did ask about if they would explain exactly what happened and whether they had preventative measures in place, and it's just not something that a company is going to talk about.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of other press asking questions and not getting any answers either.
And I have to say that some of the other media have been kind of stretching the truth a little bit, in my opinion, by suggesting that Garmin is doing this or that in response to a alleged ransomware attack, and they're kind of putting words in Garmin's mouth and not being very accurate. So we don't know exactly what did happen to Garmin, and they're not telling us, and those are the facts.
But everything's back to normal now. That's what's important.
Yep,
so.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Thanks for listening to AINdebrief. Another podcast episode will air next Friday. In the meantime, go to www.ainonline.com for the latest aviation news from AIN.